So today, Robin and I are joined by our husbands again. You may remember Gary and Steve from prior episodes, but if you're brand new to listening, these are our men.
Hello. Howdy.
And we're excited today to talk about parenting. So it's kind of a unique journey for all of us. Gary and I, we have a 8-year-old daughter. And Robin, Steve, what do you guys popping out?
Oh, no more popping.
I actually had a dream the other day that you were birthing a baby.
Are you serious?
So there must be something new coming for you, a new season. But
so that's got to be maybe a supernatural, like not a real thing.
Yeah. Something in the spirit.
Birthing an idea.
I was just talking to Steve actually at the marriage conference, and we're like, no more babies.
I've seen so many people like older in years that are having children right now.
I know.
Which is so sweet. Mm-hmm. Like I saw Andrew Whalen's having a baby.
I saw that too.
Serena. There's like a lot of like people in
I know.
school.
And I'm like, no. Yeah. No, Lord, unless, yeah. And it'd have to be a miracle too at this point, but so if it happened, then that's fine. But anyway, I take that to mean we're birthing something new.
Yeah. Yes. But you have a 17-year-old.
Yes. 15-year-old and 13-year-old. So we have 2 boys and then a girl. They're all very, very different from each other. So we've had a lot of unique parenting experiences. Yeah. And so as Steve and I were talking this morning about, parenting and what can we share, it's humbling because you realize, man, there's a lot that we would do different, and we don't feel like experts, so we won't claim to be, but we have learned a lot, and that's just through experience. Yeah. And so we thought, I think it would be a blessing, and I felt the Lord tugging at my heart to talk about parenting. And I think there's people out there who've been wanting to have us talk about this topic. And, it's a hard season of life. It's so worth it. It's so worth it, but it's really challenging. And I think all of us want encouragement as we're working on raising up young adults,
Yeah, I realize, parenting is one of the biggest sacrifices, like I've been realizing too in this season of homeschooling. I homeschool my almost 9-year-old, and it is such a blessing. It really, really is. And God's taking me on this incredible journey in that area. He's given me the grace. Not everyone is called to homeschool. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't think I was. I mean, we've talked about that on prior episodes. But the cool thing is like just the way that God equipped me to homeschool, he does equip us in every area of parenting. And he calls us specifically to parent the children that he's given us, and there's specific unique personalities that we all carry that then, help our children. And he knows like the exact right perfect fit for us. So if people are like questioning like, oh man, this kid is too much, the kid is not too much. Like God gives you the equipment, and you need to step in and pray for the grace sometimes, because man, there are some, Robin's nodding her head over here because, we've definitely had moments and challenges in parenting our own children, and it's interesting for sure.
I think, I've been through a lot of challenging things, but being a parent is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah. And there are some people who've been through hard, challenging marriages or maybe other things. And I thank God for the marriage we have. But the hardest thing that I had to do was parent. And one of our children was definitely more challenging than the other 2. And it has grown me probably more than any other experience in my life. And I think it is good. The Lord gives us these blessings. And just, you don't always realize how much growth is going to be necessary of us in order to raise this child well. Mm-hmm. And you can question yourself a lot. Like, what am I doing wrong? What what I do to deserve this? All kinds of questions come up, and you feel so inadequate. But we're now many years later, and that child is just really starting to blossom. And I look back and see how far we have come, and I realize all that we have learned in that journey. But I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of tears and a lot of, yeah.
I want to say too, before we go too far, Steve has 2 daughters from another marriage too.
Yeah.
And that also has come with probably a lot of unique moments as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other topic too, but
Right.
about co-parenting and
blended families. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
did that. Steve's daughters, when I met them, were 9 and 5.
wow.
Yeah, 96.
And so I haven't been a mom yet, and there are definitely challenges with that.
Yeah.
And there's things there that I would do different for sure.
Yeah.
You know, we wish we could go back and do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard when you've had a lot of hurts and complications with other parents and things.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have been more mature in the Lord to navigate that better. But God is good. And even today in church, the Lord is bringing that before me, that like we need to continue to pray for a restoration in that relationship.
Yeah.
And that he's big enough,
Yeah. Amen.
you know, to make that happen.
That's right.
And to even be able to apologize for, you know, things that I wish I could have done differently.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
You know,
that's humble too.
Yeah. And that I'm hoping one day we'll have that opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, you always do things thinking it's the best thing,
Yeah.
you know, but it sometimes is, you look back and realize, oh man, there were lots of misunderstandings and hurts and different things. And you go, oh, I wish I would have done that different.
Yeah.
But God's good.
Mm-hmm. You know, I see that God has grace for us as parents, because when I think of Christians, I think of child of God. And how we're all children, and like he sees us as his children. And I feel that, I mean, we talked about this before we even started recording, but that a lot of times people have kids at a young age. And I mean, seriously, you know, 17, 18, 19, they're just little babies themselves. And then you go home and you're expected to know, like, how do I take care of this thing?
Yeah.
I remember I kind of wanted to stay at the hospital for a while. Sometimes I feel like that. Just take care of me. Take care of me and take care of the baby, because I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
You know, but it is amazing that, you know, God kind of prepares us in those 9 months of like labor, and then you get to or not labor, but pregnancy, and then you get to the labor and delivery, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, and then you get the baby out and it's like, oh Lord, now what? But he gives us the grace. He really does. I know you've seen it, Gary. I'm sure you've seen it. I got to get some words out of you.
Oh, you will.
Yeah. The Lord brought me to Hebrews 12 this week, and I wasn't sure, and you know why, until he started speaking to me talking about parenting. But in Hebrews 12, in verse 5, it says, "And have you forgotten his encouraging words spoken to you as his children? He said, 'My child, don't underestimate the value of discipline and the training of the Lord God, or get depressed when he has to correct you. For the Lord's training of your life is evidence of his faithful love. And when he draws you to himself, it proves that you are his delightful child.' Fully embrace God's correction as a part of your training, for he is doing what any loving father does for his children. For who has ever heard of a child who's never had to be corrected? We all should welcome God's discipline as the validation of authentic sonship. For if we have never once endured his correction, it only proves that we're strangers, not sons. And isn't it true that we respected our earthly fathers even though they corrected and disciplined us? And then we should demonstrate an even greater respect for God, our spiritual Father, as we submit to his life-giving discipline. Our parents corrected us for a short time of our childhood as it seemed good to them, but God corrected us throughout our lives for our own good, giving us an invitation to share his holiness. Now all discipline seems to be more pain than pleasure at the time, yet later it will produce transformation of character, bringing a harvest of righteousness and peace to those who yield to it." So the Lord started just highlighting to me, you know, as I looked back, and I go, oh man, I wish I would have done this different, that different. I just thank God that I at least knew him.
Yeah.
When I started having children, there's people I'm sure that right? They've raised up kids and so far, and then all of a sudden they meet Jesus and they look back and go, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that different, right? But he's so good. He has grace for us, and even to cover our mistakes, and to take care of our children because they're his first and foremost. But realizing that God, he was disciplining me and growing me, because I was a mere baby Christian when I started having babies of my own. And I can look back and wish I would have done some things different. But I'm grateful as I look back in our life and the life of our children and the things that they've gone through, that the Lord's brought them through without me even knowing, or having played a role in helping them through it, because of God's faithfulness to us. You know, we had gone through one of our children struggling with pornography addiction and struggling with suicidal ideation and all this, and we had no idea this was all going on. None. But the Lord had spoke to me clearly that I needed to find a place for this child to go away to encounter God and go to a camp that summer. And so I prayerfully went on that hunt to find where he was supposed to go. And it was really going to be a lot to get him there because it was in Kansas City. But somehow it all came to pass. And looking back now, you know, that child said that was the moment when he got like an encounter with the Lord and set free from those thoughts. And it began his healing journey. And I think, how good is God that he didn't show me necessarily what was happening, but he showed me what I needed to do, and that he would do the rest. And then he went to work on his heart and began through lots of different things, even using you guys to bring him a book, to have mentorship in his life. It takes a village. And God will use the people that are yielded to him and are willing. And it's not always going to come on me or Steve. And I'm humbled. And it takes some weight off, honestly, that like, okay, I don't have to have all the answers.
I love that.
And I can trust my Father with my children. And I just need to stay plugged into him to hear what he's telling me to do right now for them. And I can trust that he's going to get them through okay. You know?
So good. I have a couple thoughts. I don't know. I want to see if you guys have any thoughts, because I don't want it just to be us two with you guys sitting here as bystanders. So, but I do have a couple rolling around. But
what I was thinking about, really, when it comes to our daughter, when we started homeschooling, the place we went that helped us get curriculum and all that, they also just walked us through like, okay, you're going to be spending more time with your kid, things like that. And one of the things that they said that they intended about homeschool, but it's really stuck with me for just parenting and life in general, is they told us to sit down and as a couple write what are the important things that when your child leaves your house that you want them to have learned. Don't just focus on, we want them to know math and the subjects, right? Because the context of school, and be like good character and different things. And they said, write the list, laminate it and put it on your fridge. So that when you're in a hard moment, you can just look at the fridge and go, okay, what are we teaching in this hard moment? Are we teaching one of these core values that we've said these are the important ones? Or are we teaching that when you get angry, you let frustration take over and you operate out of frustration? And River is very strong-willed. I love our kid. She's amazing, but she is very strong-willed. And there are definitely moments where her will is clashing with ours, and we're trying to teach her how to clean up after herself, or chores, or the things that she doesn't want to do. And in those moments, it's really easy for me to get frustrated with her because she's just not getting it. She's seeing the world through the eyes of an 8-year-old, and I'm coming at it with 36 years of experience. I'm like, you need to know this. You need to operate certain ways. You need to be able to sacrifice your own desires temporarily to get the reward you want later. Delayed gratification. And instead of yelling at her, why don't you understand? It's constantly stopping and pausing and saying, okay, how do I communicate this in a way where, yes, I'm being firm and I'm holding a boundary and I'm being the parent, but I'm also teaching her one of those core values that's important to me, because she's going to go through conflict when she leaves this house. I want her to know how to handle conflict in a good way, where she's then set up to be a peacemaker, not be walked over, but not respond out of frustration, making angry decisions that you regret later.
Right.
I want to teach her how to react to things, not respond to them.
Yeah. That's good. I love how you brought that up, because that right there reminds me of a time that we felt completely like overwhelmed with, okay, God has spoken to us
Just
and said, God has spoken to us very clearly. I mean, I'm just going to say it again because some people might listen to this episode and never listen to another episode. But basically, Gary and I were sitting at a spiritual conference night. It was like a hope night. And I was sitting there, and as the prophet was speaking, I heard God tell me in my spirit, you need to homeschool River. And I was just like, God, no, I'm not doing that because I don't feel called or equipped to do that. I get in the car and I'm thinking, I am not going to speak this to anyone. And I get in the car and Gary's like, hey, I think we need to homeschool River. And I was like, that's so wild. I text my mom and I'm like, hey, how's River doing tonight? She's like, oh, about an hour ago, she asked if you could homeschool her. And I'm thinking like, what? Like we all got the message individually from God to homeschool our daughter in one night. And I thought, how in the world? And this is a time when Gary's talking about how we went to that homeschool store that you told us about, Robin, and how we get there. And I had so much anxiety because I thought like, how am I going to do this? And then they just looked at us and they're like, all those things that you think matter probably don't. And let me tell you what does matter. And then they said, yes, make this list, put it on your fridge. And that's kind of reminds me of that scripture, right? But just writing the vision down. Yeah. And then when you run by it, you look at it. Yeah, exactly. I love that one. And it's just such a cool reminder, but it just shows that there's people in our community, in our lives, our relationships here, our friendships here. It's just those little bits of insight that we can give one another to help each other along the way. I think about even talking to you about, seeing Kevin back in the day and then how that worked out. And, just God just weaves all of our lives together in such a beautiful way to bring such fruit. But this is a really good reminder for people who maybe aren't pressing into community to press into community. Yeah. Because we need a village. You can't do this parenting thing alone. You definitely can't do it without God. And I would really say you probably can't do it without other people because we need that help. And forgive me if this is completely wrong to say, and if we need to cut this out. I've heard that people love it when I say that. So already I hear some ears are getting piqued. But I mean, really, my heart breaks for the family in our personal community that is now dealing with, as a parent, repercussions of their daughter making a decision to get in a car and to drive recklessly under the influence of something and take the life of someone. Now, that is a really heavy topic. And it's hit our community hard, right? So many people are impacted by the loss of the woman. And, if you read the police report, I don't recommend it, but it's absolutely heartbreaking to see how kids can make those choices. Now, a lot of times parents want to take that on themselves and be like, this is all my fault. And it's we have to be so careful not to judge. And that's really one of the biggest things that I want to take out of this is when I think about that woman is let's not shame her. Let's not look at her and be like, oh my goodness, you guys are just terrible. That's awful. Awful. But that's exactly what's happening on social media right now. So many people are putting their sense in the game and saying you guys are failures and all of that.
That's horrible.
Well, we mentioned it the other day too. We have a mutual friend who goes to the jail does jail ministry. And I love his statement. He says the only difference between me and any one of those men is they got caught. Yeah. Right. Yep. And I was talking with Soren the other day, our 17-year-old, about this situation because I knew this was a potential classmate, similar age, didn't know the names or anything. Yeah, she is. Yeah. And I just said, as you go to school tomorrow, this is what we've learned. Correct. Yeah. And I said, the heartbreaking part is there's two families that are intensely damaged by this situation. There's a community that's hurting. And the reality is the difference between the situation not involving you or me or any one of us here in the room or anyone listening is a choice. Because you may not be under the influence, but you might decide to look at your phone. And next thing you know, you're not in your lane and somebody steps out from behind a car. Or there's somebody there in the dark that you didn't see 32 seconds ago. And the same thing happens, right? And Soren was telling me that there was a classmate at school, you know, the next day when he gets to band, and we homeschool, but he's in the band, and there was a classmate who pulled out the phone and started showing people the mugshot and started passing this around. And I said, you know, the sad part is what everybody in that room doesn't realize is the only difference is it happened to that person and not to them.
Absolutely.
Because it could be anybody.
Correct.
Right? So to lose that perspective is just so sad for people to see people not realize that's the only difference.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is our children, especially as they get older, but even when they're young, they make their own choices.
Yes.
And we don't have as much control as we think.
No,
you know,
it's so true.
Yeah.
For me, it brought up conversation with River already, though, to be like, you know, and again, this is not me comparing to another person and saying they should have done this or whatever. But like for me, it's just making me realize that from a young age, there's probably conversations that we need to have that we don't think we need to, but we actually do. And so for me, as a Christian, I am not going to encourage my daughter to be under any kind of influence. But what I'm telling her is if you are, call me. I will come get you wherever you are. Yeah. If you were at a party, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to come there and get you and judge you if you call me to get you out of that situation.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
Like, I just like want to be super clear about that with her because the only thing that's going to be a hard thing for me is if you get in the car and you hurt yourself or someone else. Right. But if you call me in that moment and be like, hey, Mom, I'm at a party. You know, maybe you're not going to agree with the choices that I'm making. You don't even need to say that. Just call me from wherever. And, you know, it's opened up some kind of interesting conversations for us already, but I think they're important ones to have.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard about the X plan?
No.
I heard this years ago from someone who wanted to be able to have that situation happen with their children if they ever found themselves in a bad spot. Doesn't matter. If you're in a bad spot and you need me, you need to get out of there, just text me an X. Put your phone away.
Yeah.
Make sure your ringer's off or whatever, but I will then call you back. And what you're going to do is say, oh, okay. And what you're going to tell people is there's an emergency. My parents are coming to pick me up. I don't know the story and whatever. And you come get them out of there. And if you do that with judgment and all the other stuff, you just ruined it. But if you do it with the heart of just trying to help them get out of a bad situation, whatever it might happen to be, doesn't really matter. Then get them out of it, right? Be a safe space.
Yeah, and they said, you know, I won't even ask you any questions.
No questions.
I will just come get you if you're in not a good situation.
Yeah.
And so I think just trying to cultivate with our children just an open communication. Yeah. And that's something that I've definitely been working on. I'm kind of a reactor, you know, but I've been getting better. But I realize, you know, my children are very sensitive to facial expression change or, you know, any of that. And, you know, even recently, one of our children came to, share that, I'm not doing as well on my schooling as I've been telling you. And now I need to share all this. And he was like trying to prep me ahead of time, you know, like thinking I'm going to just blow up or something, you know, and I didn't. And I think for him, he was like, oh, okay. You know, it's like, no, we've got to figure this out now. What do we do next?
Yeah.
But there are times I can think back 10 years ago to some pretty major things that happened that I overreacted, and it caused that child to feel immediate condemnation. I mean, I can't remember how old they were, maybe 8, something like that. And it was so immediate that then they said, I just want to kill myself after I reacted.
Wow.
And I wasn't even
And again, you can't own that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mad at them.
Yeah.
At all. I was mad at what happened. And that was like, whoa, oh my gosh. Like, okay, I need to somehow figure out how to bring this in because I'm emotionally reacting so big that it immediately put them into condemnation mode. And they were reacting then out of that. And what I wish I could do is go back and not react that way, but it was just a shock. And just trying to get better and better now and going forward. This is something we were talking about even was just triggers. If I had a better understanding of my own triggers and how my children trigger me, and so that when they react, it's not triggering me and we aren't good doing this dance, it would have helped us so much. Because in particular, our child that challenges me so much, when he is triggered, he fights, he'll throw out words that you'd hope your child would never say, and then, that's just not me. So for me, it was extremely painful. And then it's hard for me not to get triggered then, right? I was like, I've never heard anybody ever in my whole life say such hurtful things. And so it was years and years of this for then the Lord in this to be able to teach me, okay, you can't respond. It doesn't go anywhere when you react, and you have to understand, like, disconnect yourself from what's happening inside that child that's causing them to react that way. Because then they typically would come back and regret it, and although not always able to voice that.
Right.
And then tons of self-condemnation would come on them for how they reacted. And then it built this really huge negative picture in their mind of who they are. Only because they couldn't understand their own triggers, control their own emotional responses, all of that. And so I wish I could go back to my younger self and understand what was happening in them, to be able to disengage myself from the reaction to the trigger, and be able to just love them better in that moment. And come back at a time when they've, the bomb's gone off and everything's blown over, But this is where, for us, bringing in someone like Kevin, to help do some therapy and just really life skill training and understanding what's happening inside of you in these moments. How does it impact everybody in your family around you? And that was one of the best things that we ever did.
That's so awesome.
And that's helped our relationship heal tremendously.
For sure. And going back to what you had said earlier, Gary, about putting on your fridge the vision, right? For what it is you're trying to accomplish. And the part that we oftentimes lose sight of is we're not parenting children, we're actually parenting adults. We're raising and training adults who happen to just be young at the moment, right? And we all are impacted by what we see our parents do in all kinds of situations, especially when the stress is high and the pressure is high or the situation is high. And, I look back, my parents were pretty stoic. My mom was pretty much the epitome of stoicism. And, and the good part was I never really got big reactions to things, positive or negative. I never got big celebrations. I also never got like the condemnation stuff that came out. And my dad was a guidance counselor, high school guidance counselor, and taught interpersonal psych stuff for master's classes and things. And his approach was the bigger the situation, the softer his response. My sister had a car wreck. My dad was like, hey, just want you to know, Mel's going to be coming home in a little bit. Sounds like the car probably got wrecked. This is a big deal for her. She feels bad. This is a big thing. We're not responding to the situation. We'll support her, but we're not. That isn't the point. The point isn't the car. The point is she's safe. So he was always into the big picture and sort of helping you see in this situation. Now, the one thing I saw him do that I do is if I disrespected my mom, he was on me like white on rice and not stoic about it. And so when I would see that particular child of ours respond to Robin in those situations, that would just flare inside of me. I would fight hard, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, just being like, oh, this is not going to go well. I can't, you're not talking to my wife this way. It's like, man, and you realize he's 8 or 10 or 6 or whatever. And it's just, it's it's just his emotions. And you're like, okay, I'm still training an adult. I got to back out of it enough to realize I'm helping this future adult see how an adult should respond, not how another 6-year-old who's much older responds. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that highlights the value of self-control that probably we gloss over a lot. As just, oh yeah, self-control, we need it. And the Bible says, control your tongue. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But I can even think in not just our parenting of River, but in our relationship. And when I think of my relationship with my parents, the better handle on self-control you have, likely the better your self-opinion will be, or your identity. Because Robin, what you were saying struck me. I've seen so many people, I've been the victim of it at times, where I lose control of myself. I say or do something that I regret, and then later I beat myself up for it, both as a parent and as a child with my parents. And it constantly should be a reminder to me that in situations, self-control isn't a sign of weakness. That's probably one of the greatest strengths you can ever have, is being able to hear something, take a pause, and choose how you respond to it. Because I know Monique and I have talked about it, where when we were younger, Monique struggled with seeing red, we'd call it. And just, something would trigger Monique and she would respond quickly and instantly, and then she would cool down really quick and she would be back to normal. And I'm a very different kind of person in that.
I really must have had like really bad anger, because I remember in those moments, it was literal anger that would come out.
Wow.
I'm grateful that I haven't had that in a long time. But anyway,
Me
brings
too.
back some memories.
Me too. But
Not fun, but yeah.
Yeah, and the point is not to condemn you in any way. It's to say, the more, and you've grown in self-control, and I've had moments like that too, and it might take more to get me to lose it, but then I have lost it, and I have regretted how I've lost it. And when we're parenting our daughter, I keep in those moments thinking about, this idea of core memories, and I look back to the memories I have of my parents and those things that really stood out to me. And I want to make sure that I'm building core memories with my daughter of, even if the situation was hard, reacting in a way that is appropriate. And showing her, and she hasn't learned it yet, one day, but showing her that you can be in really hard situations. Life can be hard. Life is hard. And you can still choose how you react. The moment you give up your decision of control is when things will start to go downhill in my mind, because life is incredibly hard, right? It's full of amazing joys, but it's also full of very challenging moments. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like we grow through God pruning things off us that we don't need or that are harmful to us, even if in the moment we want it desperately. And he has to prune that. If we don't embrace the need for self-control, both as a parent and as a child, as a child of God, it's so hard, right? Like you have to have that, and you have to have that moment of going, okay, how do I help our daughter learn self-control when her first, she takes after Monique without the control, and it's sometimes her reactions are just very quick and very intense, and that's not a bad thing. Though she needs to learn how to control when and how she's reacting, and not just let her emotions run her. And she's still at the stage where her emotions run her a lot of the times. And we even this morning had where we told her something she didn't like, and then it's a very high-pitched whine immediately comes out, and it's like, hey, you can say the same thing, but don't do it with the whine, because if you whine, I can't respond to you. I have to stop until you can calm down.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that you've been talking to River about too is that basically the marriage comes first.
Oh yeah.
That's been kind of a big topic lately, because she'll even ask you, she'll say, Daddy, do you love me more? Or, just like certain things that you've had to be like super clear about, and she'll put up a fuss about it for sure.
She's a daddy's girl. And I heard on the radio this morning when we were driving to church, we heard literally like a minute of a radio program, and it was a lady talking about how most kids are afraid of their father. For a minute,
that's what WWE.
Yeah.
Weird.
And we're again, we're just getting a clip, so we're not.
No judgment to the person. I'm sure in the context it probably made sense, But the fact that is, because when I mentioned it to you, you're like, yeah, that sounds normal. I'm like, the fact that it's normal to be afraid of your father, that broke my heart.
Yeah.
And it made me go, with River, I never want her to feel that way. But like Monique said, she tries to push some boundaries where I've had to have very direct conversations with her, because she's like, who's your favorite person? I'm like, my wife. I'm like, God, and then my wife. And she's like, why not me? And I'm like, I love you in a different way than I love your mom. I will do anything I can to sacrifice for you and protect you and be your father and be there for you. But my relationship with my wife comes first, because if I don't have a good relationship with her, it will impact my relationship with you in a negative way.
Correct. Yep.
And I'm trying to get her to understand that.
Yeah.
I have a question for Monique and Gary, and then I'll ask this of Robin, not of both of us. What would you describe for me what you think your biggest win so far has been in the parenting space? And like, what have you done well enough that you would say, this is like one of the things I would put on my top 3 list of things that we've done right, as best as you define right, or you feel like has been successful, or it's showing fruit in a way that you'd want? Again, long-term view, right? You're raising an adult who just happens to be young today. What do you think your answer would be? Because I think the other part of this is we've talked about challenges. I want to make sure people hear about some wins and some good tips.
I love that. Well, the one that comes to mind right away for me is actually getting our camper and having camper time with River.
Yep.
It's like so awesome for our family. And I'm just so grateful that you guys told us about this little mushroom-filled camper.
Slice of heaven.
Mushroom slice of heaven.
Basically, this is a fun little tidbit, but basically we got a camper up by Robin and Steve, and this was almost, I think this is our 6th summer up there, which is crazy that we're going to be rolling into that in less than a month.
That's crazy.
But we got this camper, and this is just a funny story, but basically the camper that we got, we overpaid on it. It's a whole story, and we don't need to get into all the details, but it's so cool how I wouldn't trade it for anything.
No. Yeah.
And even though we overpaid, it's like...
Well, and just be clear, you don't have the mushroom infested camper.
Oh, no.
It was the spot.
No.
It was the spot that you ended up getting.
Yeah. We found out
estate.
later that our floor in our bedroom of the camper that we bought was so like water damaged that it was so close to the bed, like going through the boards, like dropping out. And anyway, so it was like the next summer that, then we found mushrooms like growing in the seams and stuff. And so on my drive home, I found a really nice new camper, and it'll be our 4th summer with that nice new, maybe 5th summer.
Probably
This is our 5th summer with that. That is wild. But anyway, just bringing it to like the family aspect. Gary and I, we have a large home for 3 people. It just is what it is. We could each have a level and never see each other if we wanted to. And I love
Sounds
that.
lovely.
Yeah, it kind of is. But the camper brings us close, in so many ways. And it's just been like a beautiful thing for our family to just have that little slice of heaven. And I look forward to it all the time. And I am so intentional about making sure that we go up there like every single weekend that we can, because Gary and I, we do have a busy life. We have stuff almost every single night, and when you're homeschooling, it's like nonstop. I'm taking River to things, and we're just busy. And so having that time to just completely like unwind and have time on the lake, it's really beautiful. So I would say that, vacation time, camping, that is like something that I would say that's my top one. I have others, but how about you, Gary?
Yeah, my top one is the realization that no matter what I try to teach River, she's going to learn more by seeing my actions and my behavior and model off of it. And with her, she has such a compassionate heart where, despite some of the arguments and things, when somebody needs help, her first reaction is almost always to try to help the person or to be very generous or compassionate. And so it's not a single thing of like, as a parent, do this one thing and it'll make your life easier. It's, you have to model the behavior that you want to see in your child, because it doesn't work when you say, do as I say, but not as I do. I have to lead through example. And if I'm compassionate, and I hope that's where she's getting it from, is seeing us open our house to other people, or when somebody's in need, reaching out and helping them and putting our own things aside so that we can help those in need. And then I've seen her do the same. So it's a realization of she's going to pick up oh goodness, she hears everything. She's going to pick up every little thing. She's learned things that like we'll be talking and she'll say something like, how did you know that? And she's like, oh, here, and here. And I'm like, didn't even realize that you were at the door in the room. So it's that realization of they see everything and they model your behavior for good and for bad.
Yeah, it's real.
Right on. I'm just glad at least I don't think our child was modeling my behavior in the words he used towards you. So
they make their own choices. So it's definitely not a 100%, but it's like core parts of their personality hopefully will come through because of that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I looked at Robin when I asked that question. You don't know that on the podcast.
Yeah, right. I'd have to say it kind of falls in line with what Gary's saying. I see the fruit of my pursuit of the Lord daily, and that it wasn't my intent. It was just me wanting more of him and desperately trying to carve out time for me to have that one-on-one time with Jesus. And then seeing that my children were watching me and wanting it for themselves.
That's so cool.
And that has then opened the door to them having a relationship with the Lord themselves, and at least understanding the value of Scripture, of them being able to watch me worship Jesus and have a relationship with Jesus and pray through hard things. And for me, I didn't go into it for that. It's just a fruit, and that is probably, and that shift for me was maybe, 8 years ago or more, I don't know. And it was a beautiful thing. So I remember my daughter being pretty small at that time, and her, after me kind of regularly getting up and having hours with him on the weekend, and her coming to me and saying, I want you to show me how you spend time with Jesus, and it just like broke my heart, it was just like, that's so precious, God, that fruit would be there, And now as they're getting older and I see the passion, our oldest has for the Lord, and how, he's learning how to hear God's voice for himself. We talked to them just this week, and we actually read Hebrews 12 together because we started this year having family time together. We call it family worship time, but it looks different every day. We have our private time with the Lord, and then we come together. And so we just, maybe the Lord shared something with me and I want to share that and read that, or Soren might have a devotional he wants to share. And we just spend time and we pray together, but it's a time of connection. I wish we would have started this years ago. But, I shared with them this week and shared the scripture, and I said, you guys are all in this transition now of becoming adults. And so, we are still disciplining you, but we're transitioning you now into allowing the Lord to discipline you. And so you have to be able to hear his voice for yourself.
Right.
Because there are adults who never get this. But you need the Lord to discipline you. He's disciplining me. This will go throughout your life. I'm not going to discipline you your whole life. This will come to an end, and the Lord needs to take over. So whatever you do, I need you to pursue him and practice hearing his voice, because that's what's going to lead you the rest of your life.
Right.
It's huge.
We talked about it this morning, actually, just as we briefly discussed like this topic of getting together today. So on the fly, one of the things that Robin brought up that I was intentional about with our children was, especially the boys, just because of age, Solveig being the youngest, wanting to be mindful of our neighbors and what help they might need. And when it's snowy out, do they need help getting their garbage cans down to the street? Did they have a tree limb fall in their yard? Could you help out? What can we do to help our neighbors? And not expect to get paid for that. In fact, I've had conversations with neighbors along the way who have said, I'm so grateful they came. And then I find out that they paid them. And I've said, just so you know, I actually expect our children to help you and not get paid. Now, if there are times where there's a big heavy snowstorm and they come and clear your driveway and you feel like you want to give them 10, you give them some cash, great. Yeah. That's lovely. That's not an expectation on my part. And I want them to not have that as an expectation. They see it as a business opportunity as they start getting older and figure out what the value of money is. But really it was about, look at our neighbors. Because when we moved into the neighborhood, and it's kind of a small neighborhood, there hadn't been any small children for, 15, 20 years in the neighborhood. So when we showed up with some small children, our neighbors all commented how nice it was to see small children in the neighborhood again and to hear the sounds of the children outside playing, because they hadn't heard that for years. And now some of our neighbors have moved out, gone to retirement homes, have passed away. Houses now are starting to get sold because they're all hitting that 80s and 90s mark. But I wanted our children to really connect with them and then learn how to connect and talk with adults, like adults, as well as another byproduct. And now we go up to our lake place, and our oldest especially, but all of them will go and talk to everybody on the campground, regardless of age, and just have a conversation like an adult with an adult. And some, like our Soren, just loves going to sit on a porch with somebody who's long since retired and just having a conversation. He loves that, So they've learned how to connect with other adults because of that sort of, at least eyes out on the neighbors. And that's cool. Fostered some really good things, which is cool.
Very cool.
And that's something Steve does way better than me. I tend to live in the survival mode, and you don't look out when you're in survival mode.
So true.
You're just looking out for yourself. You know what I mean? Trying to make sure everything's okay. But he is so good about that. He's noticing and looking out and seeing, hey, I noticed this about this neighbor. And I'm like, oh, really? And so creating that heart in our children and that awareness of like, hey, pay attention, keep note, see if people are needing help, and don't hesitate to go be that help for people. I think is just so beautiful. Our
yard would look much better if I just said, make our yard look perfect. But it's like, there's work to do here, but so what? I mean, at the end of the day, they need help more than our branches need to be picked up sometimes, as in terms of priority, right? But I just think it's really a key skill, just to look out and how to serve others, and then connect people skills. I also mentioned that early on our boys were involved in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and that those organizations have become very different now. And and I pray for them, just for their blessing, but we aren't participating in that any longer. But the goal, the process of going out and fundraising to sell popcorn for Scouts and to go door to door and to look people in the eye, introduce yourself, explain to them why you're there, have an ask. Sometimes it produces a sale, sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, you're an ambassador for your cause. And you need to have that skill, because you're going to need to do that throughout your life. And so that too was really fun to see them flourish in that space. And I was chuckling because we had at one point set up our trailer, and we had a popcorn table sitting in front of Dick's Market here in town, grocery store, Saturday morning early, and the boys were busy catching people as they were coming in, trying to see if anybody wanted to buy popcorn to support Scouts. And our number 2 totally blew my mind, because he's there. A gal comes walking by and he says, hey, would you like to buy some popcorn to support our local Cub Scout troop and for Scouts? And she said, no, not today. And she, as she walked by, made some comment like, I don't eat popcorn or whatever. And she got about 8 feet away, and he said, would you be willing to donate to our pack? And she turned around and she said, I can do that. That would be great. And he was like, that's awesome. Thank you. And it was like, he picked that up.
I love that.
I don't know, like God just gave it to him, because none of us had told anybody, just at least get some donations. It was lovely. It was just fun to see. And she totally responded positively to that, because it was like, I'd love to do that,
That's neat.
So it's cool. I think those skills are just life skills.
Very. Well, I think we should take a wrap on this one, and thank you guys for joining us for this parenting conversation, and be sure to tune in. We're going to do another episode on this topic too. You won't want to miss it. Thanks, Gary and Steve.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. If you liked what you heard, make sure you share it with your friends, and also subscribe, so when we do release a new episode, you will be the first to know it.
And please be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a new Facebook group where you guys can come in and dive into conversation with us, ask us questions. So we would love to see you there as well.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you there.